My wife cheated on me, lied about her secret life. I followed her to his house, and when I confronted him, I never thought I'd find myself questioning my marriage like this. But here I am, trying to make sense of the cracks that started showing. Lauren and I have been married for 9 years, and we've built a life together. 2 kids, Maddie 6 and Ryan 3, a cozy home, the whole suburban package. She's always been the more organized one to plan her, while I've been the one who rolls with the punches. We balance each other out, or at least we used to. It started slowly, like a bad feeling you can't quite shake. Lauren's always had her own life. She's got friends, a book club, yoga classes, but recently, it felt like she was slipping away, bit by bit. The late nights were the first clue. She'd always had a girls' night here and there, but now it was every other weekend, and sometimes during the week too. "You know how Lisa is," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "Always needs someone to vent to about her messed up love life." I didn't question it at first. Why would I? Lauren's social life was never something I'd been worried about. But the more I thought about it, the more it bugged me. Why wasn't she inviting me to hang out with her friends like she used to? It wasn't like we were glued to each other, but she'd always been good about including me in things. Now, it was like she had this whole separate life that I wasn't a part of. It was the phone, though, that really got me thinking. She started being weird with it, always keeping it face down, always taking it with her, even to the bathroom. I joked once, "What, you got state secrets in there?" She just laughed, but it was off. She didn't laugh like she used to, and then she'd shrug it off, like I was being paranoid for even bringing it up. But the feeling stuck. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake it. It was a Saturday night when things really took a turn. Lauren had planned another girls' night out, and I wasn't thrilled, but I kept my mouth shut. She left the house around 6, dressed way more provocatively than usual. Tight jeans, low-cut top, full makeup. I'd seen that outfit before, but not when she was heading out with her friends. "You look nice," I said, half hoping she'd tone it down a little. "Thanks," she replied, not even looking up from her phone. "Don't wait up." That was the first time she'd ever said that. I tried not to overthink it, but my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. I put the kids to bed, cleaned up the house, and settled on the couch with the TV on in the background, just waiting. By midnight, she still wasn't home. I texted her, but no response. 1 a.m. rolled around. Nothing. When she finally walked in around 2:30 a.m., she didn't even seem to care that I'd been up waiting. Her hair was a little messy, her lipstick smudged, and she reeked of alcohol. "How was your night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even though I was dying to know where the hell she had been. She barely glanced at me. It was fine. Lisa had a little too much, so I had to help her get home. I nodded, trying to process it, but something in her tone felt rehearsed. She didn't offer any details, just kicked off her heels, headed upstairs, and went straight to bed without even kissing me goodnight. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling from the night before. Something about the way Lauren came home, the way she brushed me off just felt wrong. I was playing it cool, but my mind was running in circles. I needed to figure out what was really going on, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions and look like some paranoid husband. Around noon, while Lauren was still asleep, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It wasn't unusual for her to get texts, but it was rare for her to leave her phone lying around like that, especially after she'd been so protective of it lately. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, just intending to glance at the screen. Maybe it was Lisa thanking her for last night, or something innocent, but the name on the screen wasn't Lisa. It was a guy's name, Derek. The message read, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it." My heart dropped into my stomach. My hand tightened around the phone as I stared at the text, the words burning into my brain. This wasn't just some friendly message. It didn't even need an explanation. It was all right there. She'd been lying to me, and now I had the proof. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I heard Lauren walking down the stairs. I quickly put the phone back down, face down, just like she always did. She walked into the kitchen, hair a mess, still in her pajamas, and smiled like nothing had happened. "Morning," she said casually, heading straight for the coffee machine. "Everything all right?" I could barely look at her. "Yeah, everything's fine." I had no idea what to say or how to confront her, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change. I couldn't let it go. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, replaying everything in my head, every late night, every strange behavior, every little thing I brushed off as normal. But it wasn't normal, and that message from Derek was a slap in the face I couldn't ignore. By the time evening rolled around, I was done pretending like everything was fine. I found Lauren in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone while sipping wine. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, staring at her, trying to gather the courage to say something. I didn't want to accuse her without hearing it from her, but I also knew I couldn't keep quiet. "So, who's Derek?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She froze for a second, like she hadn't expected me to ask. Then, without even looking up, she said, "Derek? He's just a guy from work." "Why?" I stared at her, my pulse quickening. She didn't even flinch. She lied to me without a second thought, as if I didn't just read a message from the guy confessing how amazing last night was. "Really? A guy from work?" I stepped closer, watching her reaction. "Because he seems a little more than that, Lauren." I saw the message. Her face went pale for a split second before she quickly recovered, setting down her wine glass. "What the hell, Jake? Are you snooping through my phone now?" There it was, the deflection. She wasn't even denying it, just trying to turn it around on me. "Don't do that. Don't make this about me. I asked you a simple question, and you still can't be honest with me," I said, my voice rising. "What the hell is going on, Lauren?" She rolled her eyes and leaned back against the counter. "You're overreacting. Derek's just a friend. We went out last night. Just drinks. Nothing happened. Jesus. Can't I have my own life without you breathing down my neck?" I could feel my blood boiling. The lies, the attitude, the way she acted like I was the problem. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was going on, but she was too stubborn or too arrogant to come clean. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there with her glass of wine and her bullshit excuses. After I walked out of the kitchen that night, I thought maybe the silence would get to her. Maybe she'd realize she needed to come clean. But days passed, and Lauren didn't say a word about it. She acted like nothing happened. Like we didn't just have a blow-up over some guy she was texting at 2 a.m. But I wasn't about to drop it. I was done with the lies, done with the deflections. So I started paying more attention. She didn't know it, but I was watching every move she made, looking for any small clue that would confirm what I already knew in my gut. That's when I noticed a change in her routine. Normally, she'd head out for her so-called girls' nights around 6 or 7, but now she was leaving earlier. "I'm meeting up with Lisa for a late lunch," she said one Saturday, grabbing her purse with a little too much excitement in her voice. "Sure," I muttered, pretending not to care. I waited until she left. Then I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I tracked her phone. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know. If she wasn't going to give me the truth, I was going to find it myself. Her location popped up on my screen. She wasn't at a restaurant. She wasn't anywhere near Lisa's place either. She was at some random address across town, a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted into knots. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my keys and headed out, determined to see it with my own eyes. As I drove, my mind was racing. What was I going to find when I got there? I pulled up to the address, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. It was a small house, nothing fancy, but definitely not the place where Lauren was supposed to be. My hands were shaking as I parked down the street and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. What was I doing? Was I really about to walk up and catch my wife in the middle of something? Part of me wanted to turn the car around and leave, pretend like I never saw the location, like none of this was happening. But the bigger part of me, the part that was sick of the lies and the uncertainty, couldn't let it go. I walked up to the house, my pulse quickening with every step. When I got to the driveway, I spotted it. Her car. It was parked right there, plain as day. My stomach dropped. I knew there was no turning back now. I made my way to the front door, my mind buzzing with a million questions. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some misunderstanding? But before I could second-guess myself, I heard voices. Her voice. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I knew it was Lauren. She sounded relaxed, like she didn't have a care in the world. And then I heard laughter, a man's laughter. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I banged on the door, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. The laughter stopped immediately. My heart was racing as I stood there, fists clenched, waiting for the door to open. After what felt like an eternity, it creaked open. Standing in front of me was Derek, the guy from the text. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and confusion, like he didn't expect this confrontation. And there, behind him, was Lauren, her face drained of all color. She didn't need to say a word. I knew exactly what had been going on. The moment I saw them standing there, Lauren looking like a deer caught in headlights, and Derek trying to act clueless, it all clicked. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. This was real. This was my wife, in some guy's house, lying to my face for who knows how long. I stood there for a second, just taking it in. I could feel the anger boiling up inside me, but at the same time, there was this cold, numb feeling, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I didn't even know what to say at first. Lauren was the first to speak. Of course. "Jake, it's not what you think," she stammered, her voice shaking as she stepped forward. "I can explain. Not what I think." She had the nerve to stand there and pretend like I was the one jumping to conclusions. I laughed, more out of disbelief than anything else. "Really, Lauren? Not what I think. Because it looks a hell of a lot like you've been sneaking around behind my back." Derek, who had been silent up until now, tried to step in. "Look, man, I don't know what you've heard, but this isn't." "Shut up." I cut him off, glaring at him. "I'm not talking to you." I turned back to Lauren, my voice cold. "How long, Lauren? How long have you been lying to me?" She looked down at the floor, avoiding my eyes. "It just happened a couple of times, Jake. It's not serious." "I swear I was going to tell you. Not serious." I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been meeting up with this guy, sneaking around, lying to me, and now you want to tell me it's not serious?" She finally looked up, tears welling in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. I'd seen this act before. Every excuse, every lie that had slipped out of her mouth over the past few months came crashing down on me in that moment. I didn't even recognize her anymore. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she whispered, but I could see right through her. It was all so pathetic. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd shared almost a decade of my life with, the mother of my kids. And now, she was reduced to this, standing in some other guy's house, trying to explain away what couldn't be explained. It felt like a nightmare, like I'd woken up in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. Lauren wiped at her eyes, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be swayed by her tears this time. I was too far gone for that. The betrayal was too deep. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she repeated, like that was going to make everything better. I was feeling lonely, Jake. You've been so distant, and I didn't know how to deal with it." "Lonely?" I snapped, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So this is my fault now? You cheat on me, and somehow I'm to blame." "I'm not saying it's your fault," she shot back, frustration breaking through her tears. "But you haven't exactly been around either. You've been checked out for months. We hardly even talk anymore." I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "So that's your excuse? Because things got tough, You decided to screw around behind my back." Derek, the idiot, was still standing there, looking awkward, like he didn't know where to put himself. He finally piped up again. "Jake, I don't think you understand the situation." I turned on him so fast he took a step back. "Shut up, Derek. The only thing I understand is that you've been screwing my wife. That's the situation." He went quiet, and I could see Lauren glancing at him nervously. They were both trapped now, caught in the mess they'd created. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice quieter but full of venom. "I trusted you, and this is how you repay me." Lauren didn't respond. She just stood there, eyes wide, like she didn't know what to say anymore. And that's when it hit me. There was nothing left to say. She couldn't talk her way out of this. There was no going back. Standing there in that house, with Lauren crying and Derek looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole, something in me just snapped. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the years I'd spent building a life with her, all of it came crashing down on me at once. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was drowning in all the emotions I'd been bottling up since the first red flag. I took a step back, suddenly needing to put space between us. "You know what? Don't bother. Don't bother trying to explain. It doesn't matter anymore." Lauren's eyes widened. "Jake, please." "No." I cut her off. "Just stop. You're not going to fix this with a few tears and some half-assed excuses. You didn't accidentally trip and fall into this guy's bed. You made a choice." She opened her mouth to say something, but closed it again when she realized there was nothing she could say to undo what had already been done. Her face was a mix of guilt and panic, but I wasn't feeling sorry for her. Not anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice trembling. I almost laughed. "But you did. You hurt me, Lauren. You destroyed us." Derek finally spoke up again, probably thinking he could defuse the situation. "Look, Jake, maybe we should all just calm down and talk this out." "Talk this out?" I turned to him, barely able to control my rage. "I'm not talking to you, Derek. You don't get a say in this. You're just a guy who helped blow up my life." He flinched at that, but I didn't care. I was done with both of them. I had nothing left to give. "I'm done," I said, my voice hollow. "I don't need to hear anything else. You've already said enough with your actions." Lauren took a step toward me, her hand reaching out like she thought she could still fix it, like she could somehow pull me back from the edge. But I stepped away, shaking my head. "Don't." She dropped her hand, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't feel anything anymore. The pain, the anger, it had all drained out of me, leaving nothing but this cold, empty feeling. I turned around, not waiting for her to say anything else, and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just got in my car and started driving, trying to put as much distance between me and that house as possible. My mind was racing, but my body felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. It was a strange, out-of-body feeling. One minute I was furious. The next I felt completely hollow, like I couldn't feel anything at all. The streets blurred as I drove aimlessly through the city, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I replayed the last hour over and over in my head. Derek's smug face, Lauren's panicked eyes, her pathetic excuses. She had said she was lonely, but I had been right there. Every day, every night. We had our issues, sure, but who doesn't? I thought we were just in a rough patch. How could I have been so blind? I pulled over at a gas station, mostly because I couldn't see through the tears that were suddenly streaming down my face. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to take over. But once I started crying, I couldn't stop. It wasn't just anger, it was grief. Grief for the life I thought we had, for the future we were supposed to share, for the trust one had so freely given her. I sat in that parking lot for what felt like hours, just letting it all out. The weight of it was crushing, and for the first time, I felt completely lost. I didn't know what to do next, didn't know what my life was supposed to look like now. Finally, When the tears stopped, I took a deep breath and wiped my face. I had to make a decision. I couldn't just keep driving around in circles, waiting for some kind of answer to magically appear. So, I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I drove home. I needed to see my kids. I needed to be with the only part of my life that still made sense, the only part that hadn't betrayed me. Because even though Lauren had shattered everything, Maddie and Ryan were still mine. And I wasn't going to let this destroy them too. When I got home, it was almost dark. The house was quiet, and for a second, I stood outside, just staring at it. This place, where we'd made so many memories, suddenly felt foreign. Like I didn't belong here anymore. But Maddie and Ryan were inside, and that was all that mattered now. I walked in, trying to shake off the weight of what had just happened. The kids were in the living room, watching some cartoon, completely unaware that their entire world had shifted in the last few hours. My mother-in-law, who had been watching them, smiled when she saw me. "Lauren told me you were out running errands. Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light and casual. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just had some things to take care of. Thanks for watching the kids." She stood up, gathering her things. "No problem. I'll see myself out. Lauren should be home soon." The mention of Lauren made my stomach twist, but I kept it together. "Thanks again," I muttered as she left. Once she was gone, I sat down on the couch, Maddie climbing into my lap like nothing had changed. I hugged her close, my heart aching with the realization that her little world was about to be shattered. How was I supposed to explain this to her? To Ryan? They were too young to understand, but sooner or later, they'd notice something was wrong. I spent the rest of the evening pretending like everything was normal, reading the kids their bedtime stories, tucking them in, trying to keep the routine going even though my mind was a million miles away. But when they were finally asleep, the reality of it all came crashing down on me again. I was sitting alone in the living room, staring at the spot where Lauren usually sat, when I heard the door creak open. I didn't have to look to know it was her. I could feel her presence, and it made my skin crawl. She walked in slowly, probably hoping I'd cooled off since the confrontation at Derek's place. I didn't even bother turning to look at her. "You're still here," she said softly, her voice shaking just enough for me to hear the fear behind it. I didn't respond. I just sat there, staring straight ahead, feeling the anger start to rise again. She took a few steps closer. "Jake, we need to talk about this." I finally looked at her, my eyes cold. "Talk about what, Lauren?" "The fact that you've been screwing around behind my back. The fact that you lied to my face over and over again." She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. She deserved every bit of pain she was feeling. "I never wanted this to happen," she whispered, but it fell hollow. I don't know how things got so messed up." I stood up, the rage bubbling up again. "You made it happen, Lauren. You chose this. You could have talked to me. You could have told me if something was wrong, but instead, you ran to him." Tears filled her eyes again, but I couldn't feel any sympathy for her. Not anymore. I'd given her everything, and this was how she repaid me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it was too late for that. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said, my voice cold and final. "Nothing does." Lauren stood there, frozen, like she was waiting for me to say something that would make everything go back to the way it was. But we both knew that was impossible. You can't just snap your fingers and undo betrayal. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies or explanations could take away the image of her with Derek, or the lies she had so easily fed me for months. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, wiping at her tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her, my anger flaring again. "But you did, Lauren. You destroyed everything we had. You destroyed our family." She shook her head frantically. "No, we can fix this. I swear, I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. I'll cut off contact with him. Whatever you want." Her words felt desperate, hollow. Too little, too late. I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear that I'd finally reached my breaking point. But the truth was, I had already broken, and there was no coming back from that. Do you think counseling is going to erase the fact that you slept with him? That you lied to me over and over? Do you honestly think I could ever look at you the same way again? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak. She sobbed, reaching out to me, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch. I don't know how it got so bad, she said between breaths. I wasn't thinking straight. I know I messed up, but I love you. I still love you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love? Don't talk to me about love. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You didn't even respect me enough to tell me the truth. I had to find out through some sleazy texts. Her face crumbled, and she dropped her head into her hands, crying harder. But the tears didn't move me anymore. I was numb to it. I had nothing left to give her. No compassion, no forgiveness, nothing. She had taken all of that when she chose to betray me. I don't know what you expect me to do, I said, my voice deadpan. You've blown up our marriage, our family. How am I supposed to move past that? She looked up, her face streaked with tears. Please, Jake, don't leave me. Those words hit me harder than anything else she'd said. Don't leave me. She was the one who had left. The moment she let someone else into our life, into our bed. And now she was begging me not to go? The irony was almost laughable. I already have, I said quietly, turning my back to her. It was the truth. Something in me had left the moment I discovered her betrayal. And even though my body was still standing there, the part of me that had once loved her was already gone. I stood there, staring at the door, feeling the weight of those final words hang in the air. I knew I wasn't physically gone yet, but emotionally, mentally, everything I felt for her had already been severed. Lauren's sobs filled the room, but they felt distant, like the cries of a stranger. I couldn't even bring myself to care anymore. I'll give you time to figure things out, she said, her voice shaking. We can take a break, and I'll stay at my sister's for a while if that's what you need. Her desperation was almost painful to watch, but at the same time, it felt like a performance, like she was trying to salvage what was left of her pride. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or fear of losing the life we'd built together, but either way, it wasn't enough to fix what she had broken. There's nothing left to figure out, I said, turning back to face her. You should go to your sister's. You can pack your things tomorrow. Her breath caught in her throat, like she hadn't expected me to say it so bluntly. She blinked at me, trying to process the reality of what was happening. Jake, please. Stop, I said, cutting her off. It's over. You made your choice when you decided to lie to me, to sleep with him, to tear apart our family. She shook her head, her hands trembling. But we can... No, we can't, I said firmly. I can't live with someone I don't trust. And I don't trust you, Lauren. Not anymore. She took a step back, like my words had physically pushed her. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. But I couldn't let that sway me. I had to stand firm, not just for me, but for our kids. Maddie and Ryan deserve better than this. They deserve stability, and I couldn't give them that with Lauren still in the picture. I'll leave in the morning, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. I think that's best. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked down the hallway, her sobs echoing as she disappeared into our bedroom. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me, realizing that the chapter of my life with Lauren was truly coming to an end. I made my way to the couch, feeling the exhaustion of the day wash over me. The house felt different now, cold, unfamiliar, like it wasn't mine anymore. But I knew that this was the right decision, even if it hurt like hell. I had to do it for myself and for the kids. Tomorrow, I would figure out what life looked like without her. But tonight, I just needed the silence. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm, when the damage has already been done, and all that's left is the aftermath. I didn't sleep much that night. Too many thoughts bouncing around in my head, but I wasn't groggy. I was alert, on edge, waiting for the inevitable moment when Lauren would leave. When I got up, the kids were still asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had unfolded just a few hours earlier. I made myself a cup of coffee, staring out the kitchen window, trying to imagine what the next few days, weeks, months were going to look like. Everything felt uncertain now, like my life had been flipped upside down. Lauren emerged from the bedroom an hour later, her eyes red and puffy, dragging a small suitcase behind her. She looked at me, but I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. She moved quietly, like a ghost, her presence barely registering anymore. She packed some essentials, clothes, toiletries, the things she'd need while she stayed with her sister. I watched her from the corner of my eye, not out of sympathy, but out of necessity. I had to make sure she was actually going to leave this time. Part of me expected her to make one last desperate plea, but she didn't. She just packed in silence, keeping her head down, avoiding eye contact. When she finally finished, she stood in the doorway of the living room, her suitcase at her feet. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I could see the regret in her eyes, the weight of what she had done hanging over her, but it didn't move me. Not anymore. I'll talk to the kids, I said quietly, sipping my coffee. They'll need to know why you're not here. Lauren flinched, but she nodded. Thank you. I didn't respond. I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for Maddie and Ryan. They deserved to hear the truth, even if it was a softened version of it. They were going to have questions, and I needed to be ready with answers. Answers that wouldn't destroy their image of their mother, but wouldn't sugarcoat the reality of what she had done. Lauren picked up her suitcase and headed toward the door. She paused with her hand on the knob, as if she was waiting for me to stop her, to tell her everything was going to be okay. But I didn't. I couldn't. This was the path she chose, and now she had to walk it alone. With a shaky breath, she opened the door and stepped outside. The click of the door closing behind her echoed through the empty house, leaving me standing in the silence. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The lies, the betrayal, the constant feeling of walking on eggshells. It was all over. Once Lauren was gone, I just stood there, staring at the closed door, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. My wife of nearly a decade had walked out of the house for good, leaving behind a shattered marriage and a life I thought we'd built together. I expected to feel more pain, more anger, but all I felt was an overwhelming sense of calm. It was strange. There should have been chaos swirling in my mind. What would happen next, how the kids would react, what my life was going to look like without her, but instead, there was peace. The silence that filled the house wasn't cold anymore. It was freeing. I went to check on Maddie and Ryan. They were still asleep, their little faces peaceful and innocent. I knew that wouldn't last. Sooner or later, they'd wake up and start asking questions. Where's Mom? When is she coming back? I'd have to sit them down and explain in the gentlest way possible that things were going to be different, that their mom and I still loved them, but we couldn't live together anymore. It was going to break their hearts, but I'd be there to pick up the pieces. But in that moment, I knew I had to focus on something else, rebuilding my life. For me, for the kids. It wasn't going to be easy, but I'd be damned if I was going to let this break me. Lauren had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. The person I was before all this, the husband, the dad, the man who trusted so blindly, was gone. And in his place was someone stronger, someone who had been through hell and came out the other side, scarred but standing. I spent the rest of that morning clearing out the house, physically and mentally. I threw out the reminders of the life Lauren and I had shared. I deleted old photos, packed away things that didn't matter anymore, and reclaimed the space. It was therapeutic, in a way, getting rid of the past to make room for whatever came next. Later that evening, after I'd put the kids to bed, I sat on the couch, staring out the window at the night sky. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter that I hadn't seen coming but was ready to face. I didn't know where the road ahead would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that people will surprise you in both the worst and best ways. I never expected Lauren to betray me like she did, and I never thought I'd have the strength to walk away. But here I was, stronger than I'd ever been, ready to build a life that was mine again. So, if anyone reading this is going through something similar, all I can say is this: trust yourself. Even when the world falls apart around you, you have the power to rebuild. It won't be easy, but you'll come out the other side stronger, wiser, and, most importantly, free. This is the beginning of that freedom.